Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Ahead of the Curve, or the virtual circle bar, as we were mentioning it a little bit earlier before we jumped online. So I'd like to introduce my guest, Eric Gazzillo. Eric, welcome to the conversation.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's fantastic to have you here. It's been quite an experience through and through these last few years. I'm sure you'd probably be able to agree.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the last few years, and even the last year, like I feel like it's been like watching every episode so far. It's like almost like a progression of like media server history going through with all the different guests over the year. It's been bringing up a lot of nostalgia in my head.
That's good, I think. So, Eric, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and the company that you're from, the company that you're representing?
Absolutely. Okay, so my name's Eric. I am the director of innovation at Quince Imaging. What I do over at Quince is really focus on some of the fun cutting edge display technology. So, that means a couple different things these days. Prior to COVID, a lot of that dealt with traditional projection mapping, LED displays for live events, all that fun stuff. But since COVID, obviously everything turned pretty much upside down, however you want to phrase it these days. But really been focusing on right before pandemic, really AR, MR, and XR is getting big. So spending time on that, continuing with a little bit of that in the pandemic, but really spending time, transitioning our work in sports to a lot of these new streaming technologies, trying to work and do as much as we can to get fans back virtually into the games via some of the existing LED media server and cloud technology that exists, just putting that all together for live sports and live events.
That's awesome. Hey, Christy, welcome back. So, Eric, can you tell me a little bit about just Quince in general and what kind of company Quince is and where you guys started? I know that you've been doing a lot of stuff, of course, in sports, and I've worked with you guys in the past, but it would be great for the viewers to have just a little bit of an insight of who Quince is.
Yeah, I'll do as quick background as I can.
30,000-foot overview.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been there just a little under 10 years now. I think somewhere around the 8-9 year mark. Quince has actually been around 25 years, quietly working. The founder, Scott Williams, has been working, primarily in the 90s on large format projection, working with, some of the largest projection displays of the time. And then over time, as the company's evolved, like going from projection to full service video production for live events. And then as we started getting into sports, adding in more of the projection mapping, the media servers and control technology, and then the permanent integration of some of these technologies. So, we are primarily, video production house, but specializing on some of the emerging stuff, whether it's projection mapping, whether it's some of the new live streaming and cloud technology, or AR and XR, all that fun stuff.
Awesome. So what have you guys been doing over the past, let's just say over the past, 12 months, 13 months?
It's kind of crazy how much it's evolved. I think, it's really funny that we're doing this now in February, because it makes me kind of think back to where we were last February. We always have, usually pretty busy years. We're based in DC, so we do a fair amount of political events, and usually election years are just some of our biggest years. And, going to the start of 2020, this time last year, I was thinking, man, I am exhausted already. We're 1 month in. January was looking good. The calendar was looking good. And then, right around this time last year, I think maybe third week of February, something like that, do the last gig. And I walked off of the show and didn't realize, oh my gosh, this is the last time I'm going to be setting foot on an event floor for a while. It
was the same thing for my last flight. It was like, I would have, as one of my friends said, had I known it was going to be my last flight, I would have had a lot more cocktails while I was here. So I kind of felt the same exact way. I was like, none of us really knew what was, that it might be our last time setting foot somewhere for quite some time.
And it was particularly wild because in January, like we're saying, do a lot of sports work. So it was NFL playoffs. I was kind of bouncing around, flying around. And then at the end of the season, I swapped off to work on an esports project in Korea. So this was first week of February, I'm flying over to Korea, and I like kind of sort of heard the word COVID before, and I go over there, and everyone's wearing masks, everyone's like taking your temperature, everyone's wearing like hats and bundling up, and I'm like, wow, they really take this stuff seriously. I'm thinking of like, some of the the earlier pandemics where they didn't really touch North America at all. And I'm thinking, wow, I didn't realize how seriously they take this stuff. I'm really glad that stuff doesn't ever make it over to the US. And like within 2 weeks,
it's your fault.
Yeah, I could be the one.
You jinxed us.
But going back, I just remember everyone starts calling me. They're like, "Are you okay? I know you were in Asia." And I go, "Yeah, I mean, it's fine." I'm fine. Everyone was careful. It's fine. And like, it's crazy how fast it's turned. So like going from that, like everyone, the spring was completely wild. But like when things really started turning around was, working on some more of the NFL projects. We had a bid out to do some projection for the NFL draft. That went all virtual, and we were able to work with our partners at the Famous Group to try to still help them produce that event. So what happened was about a month out, they said they made the call, doing everything virtual. The NFL and ESPN did a big push to get all the draftees and all the potential draftees ingested into their broadcast. But the thing we were approached to do is that said, hey, normally you think about Nashville, they had thousands of fans lining up all the streets of Nashville, and like all the optics of that, of having this crowd, having this excitement around the draft. It's a huge part of that event. And we were called in and said, hey, can we do something like that virtually? And at the time, we thought, well,
you must have been like scratching your head going, are you sure? Like, really?
Well, we hit it two different ways. So first off, we go, okay, bringing in that quantity. Okay. I think it was 1,000 people over 2 days. We go, that quantity is going to be a little bit hard. But then what we realize is like, what's really missing from a lot of these apps is this level of production control. You talk about like a live stream, like we're doing now, it's very important. Hey, you're doing an interview. You need to have a side-by-side. You need to have the pips arranged in a make sensible way. When you're doing something like the draft, you can't just put 1,000 people on screen. You have teams drafting, and you have the draft order changing. You need to have the right fans tagged, moderated, and in on screen at the right times. And the draft, I had watched a few times, and it moves quick. I mean, if the team makes their selection, okay, boom, you're on to the next group. And when you have that many folks, they're pretty excited. Some of them are in costume. Some of them are getting bored over, waiting for their turn over a couple hours. We realized like the producing, the moderation, the technical ability to actually control who goes where, who is prioritized, who are your key fans. Like over the producing of that event, we were able to, in a couple of weeks, kind of like pack together a solution that, was able to get through this stuff, but it was so labor intensive. So since then, we've spent pretty much the entire year since this was, I guess, end of April last year, trying to build on what we did for the NFL draft. So we realized what was missing, and essentially we built, an app around that. So I guess now would be a good time. I know I have the NFL video. Maybe we just queue up that quick 30-second video for the NFL draft.
Sure. Yeah, we can totally do that. Let's check it out.
So I'll just talk over a little bit. It's pretty quick. I mean, talking about trying to, one, deal with the COVID situation, but you've got everyone was still just figuring out the pandemic at this point. You have, Roger Goodell in his house. All the fans were going to be in his house, and we had CJ producing fans remotely from literally his basement. We have moderators off in LA. We have moderators in, folks who are just getting used to working from home, working in their, I think we had Texas, we had Florida, we had California, West Virginia. Like we had folks bringing in from all over, trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to work together remotely? And then how can we actually get a few people in the studio safely? You can see like all these different graphics treatments, the control, and just the moderation. Like these are directly over the shoulder of Roger Goodell. That is the hero shot for the whole show. So like we had to have the ability to quickly bring in logos for anyone who was either dropping due to connection issues or not out of frame, not in frame, or not ready to go. So that was really where we started. And from there, we took about 2 months to figure out kind of what's next. We did a few other small projects bringing in, maybe 20, 30 fans. So that was, like I said, 1,000 fans. We did a few projects bringing in, I think it was about 50 folks for MTV Virtual Prom, like stuff all over the map. We did some stuff for the U.S. Open. But then really when things got wild, we said, okay, the NBA, the WWE, the NHL, like they're all trying to start to plan for the fall.
Yeah,
and we said we've got to be ready. So we did a ton of technical demos, a ton of testing, had folks working on R&D, software development, cloud resources, testing a bunch of different cloud service providers, and really like actually going through and getting the leagues in. So I don't have a video, but we did all these great, technical demonstrations where we brought a basketball hoop from someone's driveway into our shop, and we started showing off this. So because as we were able to get a good product for the NFL draft, but we're always trying to improve. So we realized, hey, the latency was not great. If you're doing a show and Roger Goodell says hi, it has to be the same quality, the same talk back that you and I are doing now. So we go, okay. Yeah. We've got to improve latency.
We've got to get rid of latency.
Yeah, we've got to cut down, a little bit of the labor on this moderation, this control. We've got to build out the control app. We've got to have something that can be a little more flexible. So, we spent a few weeks doing R&D, and then we spent, a month doing just demos. So, like I said, we had a basketball hoop. We had one of our engineers just sit there, and we said, hey, just shoot 3-pointers. And he's like, why? I go, hey, don't worry. Just like the NBA producers are all watching you right now, so don't miss. And
no pressure.
Yeah, exactly. So we he very diligently and dutifully makes, just 5 in a row. And we've got a projection screen just in our warehouse that's kind of always up. And we start projecting fans back on. And we start, very methodically looking at latency, looking at feedback time, looking at scale of all these different fans and graphical placements. And, able to show that to a few leagues. And, after a couple weeks, there's so much uncertainty as there was all year. And eventually we get the call that, hey, WWE wants to do this and they want to go big. And I talked to,
what's big? Let's talk big. So you started off with the fan experiences for the draft. So how many fans did you have to take care of and moderate within the draft?
So the draft was 500 per night over 2 nights. So
okay, it was 1,000 people. I seem to remember that now.
Yeah. So 1,000 people, but 500 at a time, and they were in groups of 15. So we were only ever showing 15 at a time. We had a little bit of time to prep and get folks. If the Bengals were up first, okay, we'd have the Bengals on deck, and we would have that quality control to look at them. And a lot of that quality control happened, via traditional switching technology, auxes on our switcher, things like that. Now trying to automate that, we're talking about, for the WWE, 1,000 fans per night, every single match of the Thunderdome, live all the time, not bringing up a few at a time of that 1,000, but literally.
So you've got no pre-staging time. You've got nothing. It's go time all the time.
Exactly. So before I hype it up too much, I think maybe we'll just we can blow through the WWE video real quick. I can talk about a little bit about what the scale and scope of this is. So obviously WWE, a tremendous amount of production value in the show in general, but surrounding the entire playing surface with fans. The LED content is primarily fans, and we have to make sure, 1, it looks good on camera. 2, it's moderated. And 3, that the fans are actually having a good experience. For WWE or for NFL, it was kind of cool just that the fans were involved. But when we go to WWE, this is really a broadcast experience. The fans aren't going because they want to see themselves on screen. That is, secondary and obviously very helpful and engaging. But they're here to watch the match, and we need to make sure that on the browser-facing side, on the fan-facing side, that side of it's clean and organized and easy to enter as well. So taking considerations for all of those. And then, really on a pretty tight timeline, I can't remember exact, but it was 3-4 weeks, talking about putting together the hardware, getting what we've done in a larger physical environment for NFL draft, getting that into a sort of a fly pack style, putting together more moderators, more cloud services, and really then repeating this. We're still doing this to this day. So it's been about roughly 10 shows a month since August. And it's still going on. It's been successful for the WWE, thankfully. They are exceeding their registration, so they are actually having a full house. It's not something where it's a gimmick. People are coming back and actually enjoying this. They want to be in. They don't have to market or push for fans. They don't have to add any. They don't need to add any playback or any plants or any fake fans. Like, they are actually having live fans naturally just engaging and being there night after night.
Yeah. So that actually begs to, the interesting part about that is that you can have a lot more fans, of course, be available and attend a virtual event, virtually shot live event, I should say, than you can in person, So it's kind of interesting to see the impact of what that might have from attending in-person events to actually being still part of the event virtually. And I think the solution that you guys came up with was really unique, it was really well thought out. So tip my hat off to you guys, because you were certainly keeping ahead of the curve with that kind of idea and mentality. I would be interested to hear about, kind of how you guys pulled it off in the process and going down that road. I could see that you had a lot of customized applications or customized software to do some of that, but how much of that is kind of off the shelf versus custom? And
that's a great question. Like, it's one of those things we have to be smart about it, because at this scale, there's absolutely no reason to build something like this from scratch for obvious reasons. You want something that's tested, ready to deploy. So we were able to find a cloud service provider that builds broadcast transmission tools for fintech, and able to pull them in, procure the services of them and their awesome developers, and have them say, okay, we need you to help us build. Here's a criteria for cloud services. Bring in excellent programmer. Hamish has been in a lot of the Ventus circles for years. Be able to bring him in to actually say, hey, we need to develop now an opera control interface. Bring in developers for the render engine and actually have folks to work on the graphics for the render engine. And then working with all of these major fan projects, and working with our partners at the Famous Group their skills as an agency and creative firm, to make sure that this is all looking good and matching and being on brand for what these teams and these leagues actually want. Because we're expanding this out for not just leagues, not just the NBA or WWE, but actually individual teams now. We just installed a version of this for the Golden State Warriors. Now that the NBA is out of the bubble, these teams are trying to get some of this experience for themselves. So we're trying to productize this in the sense that, hey, this is not something that's out of the reach of individual teams. They don't need the entire NBA league support to do what they did in the bubble. This is something that's actually attainable for these folks. And really, a big part of that is trying to simplify, on the hardware front, working with our team. I just got back from the shop, late last night. We're working on just getting together a bunch of 6 RU racks, so that on the hardware side, we don't have to travel engineers and take COVID risks to get an engineer. We have a 6 RU rack. We ship it out on a pallet. It has, here's your SDI inputs for your uplink for your fans. Here's your outputs. Plug these into your LED of your choosing. Internet goes here, and you have an experience.
Give us the link, turn it on, and away
you don't
we
need
go.
to, you don't need to like plug in like an MA2 or something and start like linking in ArtNet universes for control. It is, everything is web based. Everything can be accessed remotely, and the ins and outs are all just SDI. So, if you are in an NBA arena, you're going to have broadcast engineers who can figure out the routing, who are already there. They don't need to travel in from our facility or anything like that.
That's awesome. I think that's a brilliant way of, again, keeping things moving forward and being able to really kind of optimize and prioritize the resources that you have. So, it's very, very smart. I mean, it's just, I think it's sensational that you guys have been able to pull together a workflow, so streamlined in actually really a reasonably short period of time.
And
it's
what's
really
wild?
fascinating to see like how things change and how you adapt
Mhm.
and how you can move, quickly to coming up with solutions
Mhm.
to be able to basically adapt to the change, which is pretty phenomenal. I just want to say hi to Mo and everybody that's viewing in right now. We keep this very conversational, so you guys feel free to comment in the chat if you have any questions at any time for Eric. We don't really do things Q&A style. We just kind of organically let it flow. So if you guys want to pose any questions for Eric as we're going through the process, please feel free to drop something in the comments, and we're going to interact with you just like we're interacting right now. So feel free to do that, and actually we encourage you to do that. But feel free to do that. So Mo is asking a question. Eric, where do you see things going within the next 6-12 months for live events and activations? And what do you think is next?
Okay, good question. So I'm always very cautious in answering questions like this, especially now, because right now I'm hoping all the vaccine rollouts go well. I mean, that's by no means a given. I mean, I'm crossing my fingers, toes, and all that good stuff. But I mean, really, I'm seeing a lot of folks get back into some of the traditional production and really, hybrid production, how to hybridize this stuff. Mm-hmm. So, whether it's the virtual fans or, our work in just traditional, more traditional virtual production, trying to say, hey, how can we layer things in, say, have a 20-person studio audience or, a smaller studio audience. I think we're still, a few months out from that. But by the summer, you're going to have to, you can have theoretically a fully vaccinated audience. In with your VIPs. So if you're doing, outside of sports, a corporate presentation, you can have, say, executive leadership team, the presenters, and then, layering LEDs and monitors. I saw recently, I think it was Kelly Clarkson on a broadcast program, had a bunch of portrait monitors filling out the existing audience, just trying to get, essentially like, iPhone FaceTime style, folks just calling in and being part of that audience and like mixing that in the seats, not blocking everything off with LED, trying to make it look still like the studio set that it was. I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would think that, in all the conversations that we've already had on the show, the general consensus is that we're going to start to see a very kind of hybrid taken approach, especially from a fan/audience perspective, where there's going to be a mix between, virtual viewers or virtual audience members and physical fans or physical audience members being present in the show. And for me, I think that's fascinating. It's going to be an interesting way to see how that transitions, mm-hmm. To be able to find the balance between the tech and the technology and the physical fan experience, or the physical, trying not to impede on what it's like to be at a live event as opposed to the way that people are experiencing it now. It's going to be a really interesting contrast, I think, and kind of a balance to see how that's going to really pan out.
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts on that, Eric? Just from what from your experience so far in going from a fully physical environment to a fully virtual environment, what has been your experience in that transition? And so how have you viewed, what are the fans, how do the fans kind of feel about it, do you think, on their end?
It's changed a lot. So I will say the one thing I've learned more than anything is broadband internet in the world and even in the US is a lot worse than I thought it was. So, I mean, that's been one of the biggest considerations. That's the biggest surprise. Some of this stuff is to be expected, but I think the biggest surprise, starting with the draft, is, hey, okay, so we'll try to get a high quality feed in here, make sure that, this is going to look good on screen. Let's do 2 meg upload, and seeing how many folks could not sustain 2 megabit uploads is just absolutely shocking to me. So making sure that, in terms of choosing our protocols for transmission delivery of these video feeds, making sure that it's actually something that's, adaptive and a little bit smaller, because, upload download speeds are not great.
Well, I've got to imagine too, there's probably a lot of people that are also logging in through their iPad, or they're even coming in on a cellular connection, through their cell phone.
Yeah, a lot of people try that. We always try to discourage that. It's amazing how prevalent that is. And we're able to look at, analytics for not just our virtual fan work, but some of our broadcast events, online, and see how high a percentage that is. But, it's kind of amazing to me. I've been really promoting to, all of our clients is trying to chunk out events because like taking that in mind, you have just a traditional corporate event outside of the sporting world. Say you had a 3-day conference or a 3-day convention and you have just 8 hours a day. Normally you do your convention, you walk the show floor, you see the keynote speakers, and then you go out to the bar with all your buddies. You take that virtually, that model does not work. Especially if you're, maybe your demographic's a little older, they're watching on, maybe an iPad mini and they're watching an 8-hour broadcast on that. And then maybe their battery's dying halfway through, their Wi-Fi drops out. Some of these folks, are having trouble. Some of these producers, as they adapt, are trying to figure out how to handle lunch breaks, things like that. And I just keep promoting is that in what we're doing now, there's no reason. Like no one's flying anywhere. There's no reason that you can't do, maybe a Thursday evening show and just recur that for, 8-10 weeks. Because then you're going to get people coming back. It's regular, it's digestible. And then if you're, say, maybe like a trade organization, you're building like maybe a little bit more loyalty. It's not that event that you fly to go drink at the bar after, in Vegas. It's actually a brand that you interact with on a weekly basis. And like there's both a technical and an actual legitimate, like, audience-facing use case for that. I'm not sure, why someone wouldn't prefer that because, I've done my share of Netflix binges, and after a couple of hours, eventually you say, "Hey, I've got to get up and walk around. This is nuts."
Haven't we all?
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah, no kidding. For me, it's been my morning meeting schedule where I've got back-to-back meetings from 8 o'clock in the morning through like noon. And it's the first time I can get up and stretch my legs. It's been an interesting time virtually indeed. So Tracy was asking, on large numbers of attendees attracting sponsors, have you noticed increased corporate interest in your services?
I would say increased, yes. I think there's the one barrier to overcome there is on the corporate side. Quince, we're known for our sports. I mean, we do a ton of corporate events and trade organizations and work on those types of conventions. One of the biggest barriers to entry is, existing and legacy technology. If a company has a contract with Zoom, with Teams, with WebEx, we did a lot of work with an event producer back in September, trying to get an event all online for a global audience with video on demand. And we got pretty far. We got the solution exactly kind of framed out as the client wanted it. And they go, but hey, all of our other events are on Zoom, and we got this. Zoom offered us a great deal. They're going to be a lot cheaper, and we want to keep that relationship going. And I go, okay, we're doing this on Zoom. This is gonna happen. And Zoom's a great platform. I mean, we used it for a number of events, but it's not a one size fits all. So once you start choosing that platform, you're going to start cutting out features and start to run into a few limitations. Some of the things that we've done with Virtual Seat that just you can't replicate with Zoom.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they've all got their limitations, and it's the same thing with a lot of the conferencing platforms that are right now rapidly evolving. I mean, you're starting to see feature sets just like we're using StreamYard right now as our streaming service. The amount of features that are being implemented every single week to be able to kind of form and come into place with the requirements has been challenging for sure. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to say hi to Helmet. I know that he just left.
Yeah. So sorry, missed you, Helmet. I wish if there was live design, I haven't seen Helmet in 2 years, and I miss him terribly.
I always miss my helmet. So Jose was asking, what skills have you seen lacking in the current talent pool of creatives or techs? Or what specific skill do you see or do you look for when you're hiring for VP work?
Excellent question. Oh my gosh. It's actually not someone else actually just asked me that yesterday too. I think I feel like I have to answer this a little bit vaguely because at the end of the day, it's someone who is flexible and willing to learn. There's a lot of technical skills as well, but at the end of the day, like since we've started, I talked a little bit about how, since NFL we've evolved, changed platforms, changed the back end. And, I think I've personally learned probably 5 or 6 major platforms. We was working on RFP yesterday and goes, just, list the platforms you broadcast to. I start listing them out. I go, oh my gosh, we've done this many. And, I want to say, hey, I need someone who's an expert in Zoom, or hey, as someone who's an expert in this particular media server. but we've been switching it up so much. I mean, but like right now, I can say for sure, folks who are well versed in the IT space. I mean, everything we're doing, the importance of reliable, redundant internet, well-managed networks. When you have a lot of Zoom machines or you're downlink a lot of feeds, there's very few folks that actually know those skills. Actually, we've been joking a lot recently. One of the folks we've been using the most in our subcontractor pool is actually from the lighting world. We went over and we've been trying to focus for COVID reasons, try not to travel people in. We've got a big facility outside DC in Northern Virginia. And we've been trying to use pretty much every independent contractor we can find in the DC area. So we're not flying people in. We're not flying folks in to work with us and sit in a broadcast studio. So we were starting to say, hey, just I need more folks who understand the IT side of things. And we go, wait a second, there's a lot of lighting. Yeah, exactly. I was like, there's a lot of lighting guys out there who are pretty savvy at managing the ArtNet. And I go, how have we not thought of this? So and that's the other thing too, trying to be supportive with everything that's happened in the last year. I feel a little bit fortunate to be on the video side of things because, all the folks, scenic and lighting, I mean, they've been, as much as the event industry has been hit harder, worth noting that all the different individual vendors and contractors who work in the event industry aren't hit equally. Stagehands, lighting folks, scenic folks, I think they've been hit the hardest. I'm pretty fortunate to be working on the video side of things because video webcasts have come to be pretty popularized. So I'm trying to find folks who are available too, and just hey, I know a lot of these folks are good, appreciate the work, and been trying to lean on those pulls. And I could teach someone who's willing to learn video all day long.
I think you bring up a really good point, Eric. The other thing that I've noticed too, about aside from learning is learning the core of things rather than jumping into the pretty picture or the polished picture. It's kind of like when I started in lighting, it was about getting your hands dirty. The first tasks were, okay, go run feeder cable, go and run Socapex and great big cables to those different lights. And at the time you look at it and go, this is grunt work, this super sucks. Yeah. But you don't realize that you're actually learning, all of the bottom underneath, under the hood tasks to be able to get to a point where you can be really efficient, with the polished product and being able to do something that you might really want to do. But even now for me, I didn't really have a whole lot of coding knowledge. I got into some basic scripting and stuff like that. But, recently and to do, of course, with my job, I've been diving in a lot more and analyzing code and, learning what it does and learning how it interconnects and, learning basically all the under the hood systems of how things work so that I can really be able to speak intelligibly, for one, about the product and about designing things, but also about, what it takes to be able to do something like that. Mm-hmm. And the skill sets that you need to require to be able to even understand what needs to be done, to create something. Well,
the skill sets and the concepts. I mean, the one thing that's frustrated me, for years and years, pre-COVID, is when people focus on the button. Where's the button that makes it brighter? And
it's actually big and it's red and it says Staples on it.
Yeah. Exactly. It's one of those things you understand networking, you understand how to set up a VLAN. It doesn't matter if you know Netgear or Cisco switches. You can always find where the button moves to if you're a Disguise guy or if you're a Pandora guy or gal. If you know how to encode and manage video and network render engines, and you can learn the rest. You can learn, hey, okay, oh, this timeline button's over here. Okay, cool. It's always a lot easier if you learn it kind of in that order.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. So Eric, kind of going back to some of the fan-based work that you guys have been doing, I could imagine that moderating all of those feeds have got to be super challenging to be able to do that. So did you guys build any automated processes to be able to kind of analyze that? So you're dealing with thousands and thousands. And I saw a section in the video where you've got looked like a couple of producers, scrolling fingers across touch panels, checking out or previewing feeds.
So there's a couple levels. So I'm not going to get too far into the nitty gritty, but basically the three levels is that you've got remote moderator side where you have just talent producers ranking feeds. Say, hey, the quality's good, they're in frame, no offensive posters. Okay, we know we're able to assign a rank. Then we have an algorithm that's actually built for this virtual seat product. It's able to understand, hey, there is a front row, there is a sweet spot on this LED somewhere that we define. Let's make sure our best feeds, our most reliable feeds, are kind of prioritized in this particular way. And then what you saw on the touchscreens is that that's never enough. When you're in a live event, WWE is the best example. It's come up a number of times, but I mean, sports fans are pretty rowdy, depending on what league you're in.
Tell me about it. I work with a bunch of Brits, and I keep joking with them about football, and they're like, "No, it's soccer," or sorry, soccer, and they're like, "No, it's football, Jeff. It's football."
Yeah, exactly. But like not just like excited, but in the sense that like every league has its own particular types of fans. Like I was just joking the other day. I forget who I was talking to. I was talking about, I worked a UFC event a couple of years ago, and I was just talking about there's blood all over the projection screen and beer all over my media servers. And I go, okay, this is kind of how this is going to go. And WWE, we've had some pretty good fans, but like if you have 1,000, there's going to be one that is going to abuse that. And we've had all three systems in place: the touchscreens, the remote moderators, and the algorithm, and we've still, gotten chewed out a little bit for a couple have snuck through. And the reason the touchscreens are there and have been there from the beginning is if someone goes from being the perfect, well-spoken, clean, ready to go fan, and then all of a sudden they turn around and drop their pants, you need to just there. And it can't be where's fan number 5. You need to be hi, this. Just point at the one that's mooning the crowd.
That's pretty crazy.
And there's no other way around that.
You've really got to be on your A game to catch the moons.
Yeah. So we've got, just to give you a sense of the scale, I think it's fluctuated a little bit. I think we have 12 remote moderators and then 2 moderators operating the touchscreens, in addition to like a traditional graphics operator, just to get these folks organized, prioritized, and in there in the right ways.
So going into the production aspect of it, when things are being shot to go live and capture the experience, you mentioned that there's a sweet spot in the LED, right? Where you guys basically position, the best fans or whatever the top ranked fans that you guys have selected. Are those, like when you're shooting it, I mean, well, one, you've got all the technicalities, of course, of shooting the LED, which we've kind of covered quite a bit. But, how does that kind of play out? Like, are the shots all predefined? Do you know where everything is going to be ahead of time? Like, are the shots basically roaming and more organic? How does that kind of all play out or choreograph together?
It depends on the gig. And it's one of the things, WWE is you have to plan on it being roving. It's hard to see in the video. They are actually tiered. So, really it's who's the front row. But some of these are a little bit more sophisticated. So the Golden State project I mentioned earlier, they've got, a long, I think 3-high strip of fans across the width of the court. But then they also have an actual, a few LED screens in their tunnel. So they've got fans who are able to be prioritized and put into the tunnel to basically interact with players as they walk out onto the court. So that's not even on screen most of the time. You have to be able to segment that out. Hey, we're going to this segment, and not just, hey, here's the sweet spot. We're actually switching up segment by segment.
And do you use those displays for anything else aside from the fan-based experience? Are you transitioning to any like stock media of any sort and doing straight cuts, or is it all fan-based all the time?
We've been focusing on the fan base. It's one of those things like, WWE, for example, they've had a core production team that's been around for years. Like they've got their Hippo operator who's doing all that stuff the same way they've been, for years. No reason to interrupt a good workflow that they had. So they're just able to, preempt and go over top of our graphics.
Okay. Tracy was asking, how do you decide on the best on the best front row?
We leave that a little bit up to the league. So it's one of those things. If you think about it, I've just done so many sports projects prior to COVID as well. Is the league spent a lot of time thinking about this actually, both in physical seats, VIP seats, fan codes of conduct. These are all things that they have actually in place. So we try to base it around that, and on top of that, things I mentioned, actual stream quality, camera framing, all that stuff obviously comes into play as well. Team spirit, especially NFL draft is really one of my favorite projects all time because of like when it was. People were so excited to be part of it. People would decorate their entire house, the hats, jerseys, have their dog in team colors, all that stuff. And you look out for that stuff. Who's really the true diehard fans and who's watching? Because as we've transitioned to like treat it more like a broadcast, we've tried to add hints to help people keep people engaged, focused, and in frame, via web tools. But at the end of the day, some folks, over a couple hours, they might start to drift, and we've got to keep an eye out for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tracy was also asking kind of tail-ended question to that one. Does diversity play a role in the selection of people in the front rows? And don't know if you'll know that answer or not, but
I actually don't. It's one of those things that in the first few projects, I was so directly involved. And as we have expanded, we've really been expanding our team to work on this. So like I was saying, the number of folks involved in moderating, I've kind of geared up more towards some of the high level stuff, planning, labor, hardware, and trying to make this more repeatable. So some of the individual ones, I actually, haven't taken some of that direct direction. So I actually can't directly answer that.
Okay. So let's just kind of go back to the technology side. We've seen a lot of things kind of swing and change course definitely over the course of the last year. And you were mentioning a lot of like web-based services and cloud-based services. So with the custom application and workflows that you guys have created, like what percentage of that is incorporated as cloud-based tech versus local-based technologies? And, how much of that can you actually process in the cloud?
Great question. So, I know, you and I both, old school media server nerds. There's a few different levels, and we try to use the cloud primarily for just the ingest, getting an organized grid of fans. Anything on top of that, graphically rearranging them, cutting them up, slicing them up. One of the new features we added, even talking about like adding reactive emojis fans can click on to appear in their actual boxes, things like that. We're able to layer on top of that with some more traditional media server tech.
Okay. Yeah, so just using kind of real-time compositing tools.
Yeah, exactly.
To do all your overlays and lower thirds and all that good fun stuff. Well, in your case, probably layering a bunch of live streams.
Live streams, graphics, and control. It's one of those things. We've got this custom control app. It's got to talk to something. I can talk to the cloud to get information about the streams, but then also sharing information with that graphical render engine to make sure that they're matching up and talking correctly.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess you got the streams. So you got the streams virtually, and then you're pulling streams down locally and compositing them local. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. The compositing is what's local. Because the other thing too is, we were working on a project yesterday where it wasn't necessarily high res or as large as some of the stuff we've done, but it was a large number of very odd size aspect ratio LED screens. And we were just talking about the amount of just cutting, slicing, and moving around for each output. And it's really, only a couple dozen fans, and we're thinking, okay, the cloud stuff's easy, the control's a little bit easier, but oh my gosh, figuring out where these go, where the audio is embedded to. We haven't talked about it much yet, but the audio is a big component of this.
I can imagine. Audio's got to be actually in some cases harder than video.
And that's where we're fortunate in that our cloud service provider is able to actually mix down audio. Some like the show I mentioned earlier where we had to use Zoom due to an existing contract. They just kept asking over and over. We want everyone cheering. We want everyone to really be talking and interacting. And a lot of these mainstream tools have huge audio limitations, and that's platform wide. It's not something you can click or call Zoom or call Microsoft Teams and say, "Hi, I just need to talk to. I need to have five audio streams mixed down." The backend's not built for that. So we actually are able to every family ingest mix down, and then through traditional video technology, embed that and get that to the right place, whether it's a broadcast mix or local mix, being able to get that with the right feed of fans to the right mix position. That's obviously a project in and of itself.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that must entail. Just the complexity of it and being able to separate everything and then basically pull it all back together has got to be one incredible task. So before we wrap up, Mo's got one question I think that we'll throw on here before we wrap up. So are virtual hybrid events here to stay in some form as phases of live return? And what advice do you have for production and staging groups who are floundering and embracing virtual production?
Okay, so two questions. So the first one, I gotta say, I think they're here to stay for a while. I don't think forever. I think one, we've seen, I think you mentioned it, adoption. Some folks have increased attendance for their events and increased the actual geographic reach of their events. We do a number of events that have international audiences, and when you don't have to fly in, it's a lot easier to get folks from Asia, Europe. If you have a good time zone and a favorable event timing, you can start expanding your audience that maybe couldn't afford to fly to your event. You can start reaching them, one, more regularly, two, to a wider audience, less financial, reaching different demographics, financially or geographically. If they can't afford those tickets, obviously that's going to be a completely different demographic you're able to reach. And depending on who you are and what your product is, that we might be serving, sports or otherwise, that's pretty favorable to some, folks that are, either ticket driven or, just driven by advertisement. If you are a trade organization and you're supporting, vendors in say like a traditional convention hall setting, if they're reaching more people, then your organization suddenly has more value to those vendors. And I think that's the one thing that, kind of like a raise all boats type scenario. So I think it's going to be here for a few years, at least to the point where people start forgetting people are eventually going to start forgetting what it's like to hang out at a bar and catch up. And then there's going to be like a whole phase of novelty of that. I'm sure there'll be a lot of novelty bars in like 2025. Like speakeasy bars will pop up, 100 years since the Roaring '20s. But we're not there yet. I think we've got 2 or 3 years of this. And what was
we had the speakeasy phase, right? So yeah. It's going to be interesting to see if there's a hybrid approach where you're at a bar and you can just have a friend that kind of tunes in virtually and you're walking around having, virtual people kind of hanging out at the bar with you or something along those lines. I think that, I honestly think that, my opinion just on this really quickly, I think that it's probably going to be around for quite a while because a lot of bigger companies have also realized that you can have a lot more exposure virtually. You can have, as we've already talked about, you can have a lot more attendees at an event and a lot more exposure to big brands as well. So sponsorship opportunities are going to be actually bigger, I think, in a lot of ways, because again, you've got a lot more impact, a lot more people that are going to be able to see it during the time of the event. And you're also going to have the ability, again, like ticket sales and being able to have that appeal where they can sell a lot more tickets to an event virtually. The ticket prices, of course, would be less expensive than others. But, I think that people are going to get smart about it. There's going to be I think it's going to be around for a while, in all honesty. I mean, we've kind of adopted it now, and people are used to it, and it's kind of become like a normal way of life. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be super, super interesting. So, Eric, I totally lied. I want to take this one last.
Totally.
Because I loved Fonda's ask here. During this sudden change in the industry, what is the one thing that you're most proud of your team accomplishing? What is something that you are disappointed in the outcome? So I love the accomplishing part, and disappointment and failure is always a way to learn.
A good question. I mean, I needed to state in general. I'm incredibly proud and fortunate to have an awesome team that I work with. Like I said, Quince as a company has been around for 25 years. Fonda's been there over 20, I believe. I think 21, 22, if I remember correctly. But like having a team to one, when we're in the middle of things, an NFL draft, actually be able to pivot quickly, that helped us so much. I would say like one thing I'm most proud is like being quick. When we were in April doing this stuff early on, it gave us such a foothold to be able to build on that over the summer and then the fall. There's a lot of folks who do there's so much great work in the industry happening in general, but like my team together actually being able to, when lockdowns were in their firmest, being able to actually put the R&D, the time, when everyone was really, just emotionally exhausted from what was happening in the world, and being able to actually do this. I mean, I'm still incredibly proud of that project in particular. Now I got to go from positive to disappointed.
We'll try and end it on a positive note, I promise.
I think it's disappointing that I do like to see and interact with people. So, it's one of those things. We have a running rule. So we've been treating our office like a broadcast video hub, transmission hub. We've had a few, speakers come into our soundstage a few at a time. And we've been so strict about, hey, if we have a speaker coming in to do a stand-up on camera, hey, if you are not touching gear, you are not in this building. Oh, hey, you need to get your paperwork. No, you should have gotten it before the pandemic. Hey, you need to pick up. And that's the one thing I miss seeing people. I've been trying to be a little bit better about it. If I'm not QCing a rack of virtual fan equipment, I'm trying to not be in the building, and it's a little less fun. I love to be around people, but we can do this virtually. We can hang out. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have seen you right now. So,
Sure.
There's obviously pros that come along with it.
Very, very true. I would honestly say it's the same thing for me. I mean, I've been very, very blessed in so many ways to have a pretty tremendous career that I've been following along. But, I've been very thankful to work for some amazing companies, very bleeding edge and wonderful folks on all different ways. And it's been an incredible experience, meeting a lot of people. I've been working now for Seventh Sense for the last 10 months, almost a year, going on a year, which is crazy when I think about it. And I have only met in person, I've actually really only met like 3 people, I think, off the top of my head, physically, out of the whole team that I work with. And I work with about 50 people in the company. And it's been really interesting, getting to know people in a virtual world as opposed to a physical world. And it's been really great being able to do that. But it's been a little bit of a downer at the same time, because just like Eric, I'm very much a person-to-person kind of person. I like to have that physical engagement, and I like to be able to, read the feelings in the rooms and be able to feel things, So that's been like the hardest part for me, is to be able to kind of gauge how people feel when they're in an event, or how people feel when they're sitting online and having these conversations. But as far as like disappointment in any outcomes, really, that one's really tough, because I would say that the hardest and most difficult part has just been really getting things and obtaining things. And it's been kind of frustrating in some cases, being able to, get something that you really need to accomplish a result. And that's been challenging.
Yeah, ditto on that. I'm really fortunate to have some a few folks helping out with procurement in general, trying to find people and equipment when a lot of stuff is out of stock, or borders are closed and shipping is closed. That's been a challenge of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would like nothing more than to actually hop on a plane and fly over to England and actually go and physically meet the team that I work with. I can't wait. Counting down the days. So Eric, I just wanted to thank you so much for being my guest on the show today, or part of our virtual circle bar. If you guys want to reach out to Eric, you can reach him and check out more about Quince. Check out quinceimaging.com. They do incredible events and just incredible work, guys. Like, you guys are awesome. Also, if you want to reach Eric directly, you can reach him at his email address at egazzillo@quinceimaging.com. So, Eric, thank you so much for being a guest today.
All right, thanks. I appreciate it. It was a blast.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Next week, actually speaking about IT and networking, I've got Stefan Villay coming on the show from Smart Monkeys. So we'll be talking a lot about what Smart Monkeys brings to the table and all the tech and all the different things that they work on. Very, very cool company. Do a lot of really amazing things and amazing projects. So make sure to check that out next week. And as I say to everybody, thanks for tuning in and stay ahead of the curve, everyone. Thanks again, Eric. It's been a pleasure having you.
Bye.